Okay. Hello, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Good. Well, welcome. Welcome to this seminar on unconscious bias that has been organized by the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee of the PRBB, the Barcelona Biomedical Research Park. I'm Maruxa Martinez, and as the chair of the committee, I am very pleased to introduce you today to our speaker, to Lidia Arroyo. So Lidia is a researcher in the Gender and ICT group at the Internet Interdisciplinary Institute of the Open University of Catalonia. And she's also an assistant professor of the Department of Social Psychology at the Autonomous University of Barcelona. Her research, based on mixed methods, focuses on gender, work, and ICT, and on the prevention of gender violence in young people. She's currently the principal researcher of a project on that is about the incidence of occupational segregation on COVID-19 prevalence from a gender intersectional approach. She's also presently involved in a series of European projects, which are all involved on gender and science, such as GenPort, ACT, and E40. So she's very actively involved in this topic at the international level. She has been a visiting research fellow in both Argentina and Belgium, and she won in 2011. She was awarded the Young Sociologist Prize from the Associació Catalana de Sociologia from the Institut d'Estudis Catalans. So we're very, very happy to have Lidia with us today to talk about unconscious bias from a sociology point of view also, to try and understand what it is and why it happens and what we can do about it. Before we start the webinar, just a few kind of technical things. So during the seminar, everyone's microphones except Lidia will be muted. So if you have any questions, you can write them in the chat, and then at the end of the talk, we will go through them in the order in which they were posted, they were asked. If you have an urgent question that you want to ask during the talk, feel free to raise your hand also using the button here at the bottom of the screen, and we will try and find a moment to give you voice so you can ask it. You can also use the chat to comment or communicate with each other. And if there's any technical problems, please let us know also through the chat. And also just a reminder that this webinar is being live streamed via YouTube in the PRBB YouTube channel, and it will be there for anyone who wants to watch it later. So we invite you to subscribe to the channel so you can, I mean, obviously you can watch this video, and also so that you are you know all the other events that we organize in the future, and you are first in line to know about them. So without further ado, Lidia, welcome again, and the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Maruxa, and thank you very much, Barcelona Biomedical Research Park and the Committee on Gender and Diversity of this park for inviting me to take this conference. It's a pleasure always to have a context with the dialogue between social science with other science, in this case, the biomedical science. And let's go to talk about unconscious gender bias. Okay. I will offer this sociological perspective, but with an interdisciplinary also perspective, because it's a concept that is related with social psychology and also sociology. First of all, Maruxa sent you the test of the implicit association test about gender bias. I don't know if any of you had been the opportunity to do it, but I would like to ask you about the results, and then to do this, I will invite you to answer a question. Perhaps you can help me to. Okay. Great. Then you can see this questionnaire about the results of this implicit association bias test. And if you can answer, it could be very great to know which is the level of association of the unconscious gender bias in you, in the public. It was very interesting to continue the conference. Great. And if you don't do the test, it could be great if you can also answer more or less that your own predicted results too. Okay, I wait 2 minutes more, then we will check the final result. Great, we have the 50% of people who answered the questionnaire. Okay. Okay, then we find here a very conscient public, because the main result, the 50%, you obtain a result that you have a slight association of women with home and men with work. No, a little. No, you associate this a little, but a slight. Okay. The second one and the third, the 20 and 20, moderate and a strong association of you are a very a terrible gender bias researcher and citizen. And it was very interesting because there are 7% who has a slight association of men with home and women with work. Very interesting, these people. After the presentation, it could be great if you can talk about your experience and how it is possible in this society and your socialization process. It could be very nice to check it, the differences. And okay, thank you very much. And let's go. And also, I would like to share my results. In my case, I have a strong association between woman and home words and between men and career words. I'm a terrible gender biased person. And for me, it's very shocked because I am a feminist, I am an activist. In my personal life, I try to change the dynamics of this sexual division of labor, and for me it's very shocking. But I thought that you also have these more or less the similar results, but no, that I am more gender biased than you. Then perhaps it could be better that you talk than me, better than me. But I have the word to reflect why it happens to me. Then it's very interesting to notice that this test, and when I guess that when you have done the test, you also think in other bias, the race bias. I think many of you had to answer as a minority and also a vulnerable race, in terms of, for example, in the case of here, the Catalan and Hispanic people. And then we can check that some bias in the first question. We don't know how to what are they doing, and we know that they are doing different studies, but also the gender binaries, no, of the activity. It is very interesting also to reflect on how, no, because at the beginning, perhaps this is the strong result. I thought that perhaps there were transgender people, and no, and then I tried to identify transgender profiles, but I think it's not the case. Okay, then let's go to talk about this test and the unconscious gender bias. What is unconscious gender bias? On the one hand, this kind of test and this concept is very useful for two main reasons. One, it has an educative purposes in terms of be aware about your non-recognized bias. For example, in my case, I thought that I was very, this topic is, I overcome this topic in my not childhood, but in the adolescent period, and then but not. I am also gender biased. It's true. No, I recognize it, and this test can help you. And help me to identify it. And also, I think that I'm not a no, in Spanish machista, a macho, and then I'm not gender biased. I think this is the main thing that all of us, or all the people who are not effectively and very activist in the patriarchy, and the machism, the macho culture. We think that we don't have gender bias, but with this, through this test, we can check that perhaps we have more gender bias than we thought. And another thing that I think it's very important of this test is the importance of sexual division of work in the gender bias. And when we are, for example, hiring people, or we are doing research, we don't think in the existence of gender division, sexual division of work. But in fact, we know now, and through this test, that these unconscious sometimes thinkings and ideas are in our mind, in the dark side of our mind. And it's very interesting because it is rated with social imaginaries and subjectivities. And here, in this this year, we are in a very modern in a post-patriarchy. It seems a post-patriarchy society, and we have social practices that challenges this prejudice. For example, in the careers, we have more women than men who are studying a degree in higher university. In all fields, we see women working, as engineers, we're working as doctors. But why this imaginary, the social imaginary, and why the subjectivity is still relevant, this sexual division of work? And for example, in this COVID period, and with the pandemic and the measures, not the pandemic, the measures related to the pandemic, we realized that our social practices that are more, it seems, more egalitarian. For example, we know that women now are working in the labor market. They have a strong inversion to go to the labor market, but because we have the schools, without the schools, we know now that when we have to pact between women and men who works and who have to care, we know now that it is still this very old model of the male breadwinner and the woman housekeeper. It's terrible, but this pandemic show us that this model is still valid in our minds, in the dark side of our mind, and in the social practice if we don't have the help of public policies or the educational system. Yep. Okay, but I lose. No, this is light. But we have to be careful with the term of unconscious, and also when this unconscious and this concept in general. Be quiet, because be careful with the implicits. Which implicits? Because the gender bias are beyond unconscious mind. Why? Because this concept of unconscious, it seems that it is unavoidable or inevitable, but it is not possible to avoid. Then I ask this question because sometimes the Saskia Sassen, a very well-known sociologist, say that we have umbrella concepts that help us to read the reality, in terms of analysis. And this concept is very useful because we open the eyes about I thought that I was very gender bias, and in fact, I have unconsciousness. But this concept also could hide this part of if it is unavoidable, is unconscious. I didn't have this intention because poor of me, I am unconscious gender bias and I don't have any responsibility. And then it's important to avoid these risks of unconscious. And another item related to this is the idea of this ingenious conception of gender bias. And Mick Berlew, it's another sociologist specialized in gender relation and work, say that often the discrimination is very conscient and deliberate, and this is not unconscious bias. And she said this idea because sometimes we think that with a training or a sensibilization course, we solve the unconscious bias of some male colleagues, that poor of them are gender biased, but they don't know it. And then it's important to notice and to not be with this ingenious idea of this unconscious gender bias, because sometimes and many times these are conscious and deliberate. And another issue that I think is very important from a sociological perspective is that gender bias are beyond individual dimension. Always, always, always. The reasons, the causes, and the dynamics of gender bias are always in the intersection between individual and society. And this individual, it seems that it could be endogenous, having an internal cause or reason, or poor of me, for example, in my test, I don't know why, perhaps I have to do therapy to solve this internal problem, but we know that it's not an internal causes, it's the interrelation of individual and social aspect that we are focusing now. And it's important also to superset is beyond binarism. And the binarism is also related with this unconscious gender bias. It's important too, because the test is very binarist. And then we have to be aware about the reproduction of this conception of women are, men are. Okay. And here, I would like to show it, this result that is rated with a general questionnaire that the Generalitat de Catalunya run in the period of the pandemics, and then with a very interesting question that is, now, is there a more egalitarian distribution of care and domestic work? And then men say that no, because before the pandemics, the distribution of care and domestic work were already egalitarian. Then the 42% of men thinks that in the past and also the present are the same, they are egalitarian. But women are 27 only of women think that in the past and in the present are egalitarian. Then in this question or this study, it's very exhaustive with different dimensions of times, life, changes in the timetable during the pandemic, to see the impact of the measures of the pandemics. But this question is the question that we find a higher gender gap. It's the perception of the distribution of the task in home. And then here we find the core of gender bias. Now, why men think that they help as much as women in home, and women think that it is not true? No, that they for example, this answer 20% is the double. The gender gap is the double. 20% of women say that no gens in Catalan, no is not at all. Now the distribution of care and domestic work is not at all more egalitarian, and only 5% of men think that it's less egalitarian. Then I think this is one of the examples that we find that where are these gender biased? Okay, and why I say this issue of individual and society, not social aspects. I think this is one of the main lessons from social science, that when we are working, thinking, researching on individuals, humans, we have to think in individual, but in social aspects, it's necessary. Because on the one hand, we have these structural factors that influences our opportunities, that the society offers opportunities, for example, in this society by gender, by social class, by level of studies. The social structure also produces discourses that influences or social imagination, what women have to do, what men have to do. But on the other hand, it's true that we have agency. All the people have individual and freedom to choose what they are wanted to do. But this election, it's very close, and the interaction of social structure and agency is what we can do. And then it's important to take into account this individual and micro level. In sociology, we talk about micro level, and also the society and these macro level aspects, the social structure, the social discourses. But it's also important, another one, it's the meso level, that it's related with the policies, the institution, the organization, for example, in the university. If we have a culture, androcentric culture, in terms of the timetable use of distribution of work and the timetable organization. But it's important to know if our research center have a gender equality plan. These kind of things, it's important. Or if we have a law, a Catalan law that say that the research centers or the labor market have to introduce gender equality measures in the organization of the work. And which elements are configuring this gender bias? on the one hand, there are gender social expectations, for example, in terms of co-responsibility, in terms of gender equality. Who takes care when the pandemics, the lockdown close the schools? And here, there are social expectations, but it is incarnating with the woman's and men's agency beyond gender norms. We find different and the decision and the freedom of men and women freedom, but indeed with this social pressure to finally decide not you have to go to work because you win more money than me. And now it happens that in the past there were some theories of the social the human capital that say that women decide to go beyond labor market and stay home because they earn less than men. But now we find that women sometimes earn more money in the labor market, but their social imaginary, their gender norms say that no, you have to take care of your child. And then it's also related in case of the research with the scientific institution framework. If we have gender equality measures, for example, the scientific environment is also very important. Not only the institutional measure, but also the environment of the institution. If this is a family-friendly environment, a personal-friendly environment, or is this a very presentialist environment, it's important too. And also the public policies and legal frameworks. All these dimensions are important to identify gender bias in science. And key concepts from social psychology and also sociology, because they are both. And also there are philosophers too that enrich the theoretical framework. Key concepts to understand gender bias, why it happens. So on the one hand, we have the personal, the subjectivity, the individual practices, the decision, the actions. And on the other hand, we have the society, the social structure, the gender and social inequalities in labor market, in science, in culture, in economy, that it's related to the power, the power distribution in terms of material resources. In the second place, in society, we have social practices, in terms of the Gaussian model. In general, the people do that, then I feel pressure to do that too. Or also the marginal practices, it's a very interesting concept in terms of how the margins open new ways of be woman, new ways of be men. It's very interesting. And also the social imaginaries in terms of society, the symbolic capital in terms of Pierre Bourdieu, that say that who have the power to construct new knowledge that predict also new behaviors, and we will focus in this issue later. The power of symbolic resources, the power of culture, knowledge, language. And here two key concepts. Dispositive of power, and I write here Foucault and also Amigot and Pujol, that Amigot and Pujol, Margot Pujol, Patricia Amigot analyze the concept of dispositive of power from Foucault from a gender perspective. And it means that how individually, how in our subjectivity, the individuals interiorize the power and the social structure in terms of the how interiorize the social power inside us. I think it's very interesting in terms of gender, how we interiorize this subordination position of women in general in the society in our subjectivity. And also another interesting concept that is the gender performativity from Butler. That for understand this concept, I think it's very useful to understand also the context of the framework of the symbolic interactionism, that is related that how we reproduce or transform the social structure in each social relation. Then we are responsible to reproduce and or transform social structure in each interaction, because at the end, society is the configuration of all social interaction of all the people. And then it's important that to identify how individuals have the responsibility and to be aware of when we are reproducing this gender bias or when we are transforming this gender bias. And I think the social interaction here is related with the action, but also the no action. The no action is also an action, because if, for example, we are seeing gender discrimination and we don't do anything, we are acting to reproduce this patriarchal system. And also the performativity of language, and it's related with Austin and Wittgenstein, that it is related the how language configures our world and our possibilities, or expectation, or desires. And here, this sentence of Wittgenstein that I think it's very clarifying in this sense. The limits of my language mean the limits of my world. I think it's important also. And here, in terms of science, it's very important an issue is who have the power to construct and to build this language that at the end is the limit of the world of population. And here, the scientifics have a very important role and responsibility to introduce new ideas, new language, new concepts to see inequalities, to transform and to overcome inequalities, or to reproduce it. In all science, in all science, concretely the science who are related with human. Okay. Then gender bias in science is about decisions in job position in terms of recruitment, retention, promotion of women researchers. Here I am talking in terms of European policy framework, the era priorities of the European Union research, that is related with fixing the number of women. Why fixing the institution a structural change for example, with gender equality plans? Why for some disciplines the scientific institutions don't hire women? Why are only men in leadership positions, in top management position of research institutions? And on the other hand, it's also about the decision in scientific production in terms of gender dimension in research and innovation. Pick the knowledge. We are producing a very gender biased knowledge, and then it reproduces this lack of women in science. And at the end, and at the same time, the lack of women who have the power to decide which knowledge is relevant influence the lack of capacity to introduce this gender dimension in research production. Then we see in this graphic, this gender, all the knowledge are gender, with gender perspective or without gender perspective, but it's gender. Because all the science we produce, they have, and this is the Science and Technology in Society study, this STS study, how our cosmovision is the vision who have all of us in terms of gender or non-gender or androcentric, are inside the topics we select, the way we research, and the results of we research. And for example, in technological devices, it's basic what we can do and what we don't we are unable to do with technologies. It's related with the cosmovision, and there is a very interesting concept that is gender scripts. It's like the scripts on gender in the knowledge, in the instruments, in the innovations, and also it reproduces or transforms the society, the social structure, the social practice, and social imaginaries. And at the same time, these social practices, social imaginaries, and what we do influence the science, the capacity to build an androcentric or a feminist culture in science. No, a science with absence of women or with presence of women. And then, which are the consequences of gender bias? These are, on the one hand, we have inequality in terms of labor conditions of women in science, in vertical segregation, in salary gap, in precarity in terms of temporality. Then we have less women in the top level position to make decisions what knowledge are relevant and what research topics have to are worthy to be investigated. Then we have a lack of women creating this symbolic capital that is in terms of new concepts, new knowledge, and then we find this androcentric knowledge. And on the other hand, this lack of social equality in labor condition, it is related with the sexual division of labor. These institutions, research institutions that requires the full-time and full life availability to work, and then the expulsion of women of the science system. And we know, all of us know, and the statistics also show us, women with child that they abandon their scientific career. Then it's important, this concept also, the situated knowledge of Haraway in terms of including a gender perspective or not including a gender perspective. It's basic to produce gender in the science in terms of it seems that when we are incorporating gender perspective, we are incorporating a cosmovision, even an ideology in gender. But when we don't incorporate the gender perspective, it seems that we are neutral, we are doing science in general. But when we don't incorporate gender perspective, we are doing an androcentric and gender biased science. And why and how is it reproduced? Here we have a picture. It's a very nice project that I will present you later. And I would like to ask you about what do you think? Who are or what? No, they are looking at something. Do you imagine who are behind the blue space? If any of you, I invite you to. Wow. Oh, you find me the answer. Sorry, this is the person who are looking at. Now, this is a very nice activity that you can also do with the students about the intersectional bias in terms of different activities. Here we can find several students looking at, it seems for the computer we can think in a man or in a woman, in a white woman. I think it's very interesting also. It's a black woman and it's not a thin woman too. It's also important, this kind of because the bias are beyond gender, and also gender bias is related with an image of the ideal woman. The white women with a social class women with a specific physical behavior and with a specific body. And here, another example. Here, this is the project, the Trivia Diversa, Colectivo Ovejas Negras. Very nice. And I ask you, what do you think that in the blue space, what do you think that which thing or person can be there? Now I try to do the activity with you. What we could find in these blue spaces? I will check if any of you have the answer. You can raise the hand. Be brave. Okay.
Yes, Lidia, they are talking in the chat. I don't know if you can see it. Okay,
Great,
perfect.
great. A baby. Yeah, I see. Thank you, thank you. Baby, someone taking a picture. Very nice. Another. I think it's interesting for you to think in possibilities. A dog. No, because it's interesting that now we are thinking the intersectional perspective in some terms, but it related with knowledge, the scientific knowledge, and also the activism. And for example, the LGTBI activism is very active in the intersectional approach, and it is great. But there are other intersectional approaches. Okay, thank you very much for your comment. I will share the screen again. And now we see that here we find here is the complete picture, and we find a chair with wheels that is one of the this lesbian couple, an interracial lesbian couple, with disability. And I think it's important to always think which bias we can have, in gender, but also which concept of women, are the concept of women that we have in the mind when we think in a different aspect, because it changes. Because, for example, in the vulnerable women, I think all of us have another conception of women, that if we think in a teacher, in a woman who is a teacher. Okay. And I think I have another question for you. That do you think that men are more brilliant than women? I look for the 1 minute to answer. It's a very easy question. Okay, we have 90% no and 4% yes. One person, a brave one, and then later it could be great if you can explain it, and if you want, why do you answer it. 96% of the people that we are here think that men are not more brilliant than women. But now we check this with with this. Time. Sorry. With this. Okay. With this, and here we find the study that say that the gender stereotypes about intellectual ability, and I know that most of you know this study, that at 6 years old, little child interiorize the gender stereotype that men are more brilliant than women, and this is the gender unconscious gender bias start and consolidated at 6 years. And then how about our perception that I know that you think that men are more or less the same brilliant. It not depends of the gender, the brilliance of the person. But when we think in a specific question, we think in a specific practice, we know that some of these idea that at 6 years are consolidated in childhood, that remains in the dark side of our mind. And here I want to put this one. And I ask, what do you think that, what is he doing? I don't know if you see the answer, but I would like to ask you this issue. An answer. Building something. Okay. Okay, so a question about the country, very interesting. About the study, I think later we can discuss about that. Okay, then if all of you are thinking about, no, what is he doing? No, he has not cars, and he's playing and brushing this this little doll. Okay.
Someone guessed it on the chat.
Oh, great. Hey, I didn't see it. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Manu.
So Lidia, maybe we can do another 10 minutes or so of the chat, 15, and then we can have time to discuss some of the questions that are arising.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, Manu. Then why it happened at 6? And we know that it related with self-context and the expectation of others. And also, it's very interesting, the question about the cultural difference that this study, the national difference in gender science stereotypes predict national sex differences in science and math achievements. No, it's terrible because it's not related with the biological predisposition. It's about the culture, gender, culture, stereotypes and differences. And here, we have the concept of the sex, the set of biological characteristics that are not mutually exclusive. That we have to include here the intersexual also persons, and the gender, that is the social attributes and opportunities associated with being a male or a female. And here, this is the catalog of Abacus. It's a very progressive cooperative here in Catalonia. And when you start to check the catalog, on the dresses, for the carnival, you look at this. The women, girls are the main thing. The first one is babysitter, not this babysitter with the umbrella, princess, and the boys when start to appear is a ninja. And then it's not only related to Abacus and the market. It's about the tales. It's about the cartoons. It's about the adult-child interactions, the sanctions, when we sanction a girl to do a male behavior, or we sanction a boy to have a non stereotyped behavior. For example, the comments of the congratulations, in the strength for him, beauty for her. The same action could be an observer for him and a gossiping for her. I think all of us know these kind of unconscious comments that we do and project on child. And here we have the Maria Ángeles Durán, that is a great sociologist, and that she started to talk about this reproductive sphere and productive sphere and the intersection of both. When in the sociology of work, it's important now to think that the participation of women on work and also in science is related to the situation in the reproductive, who takes care of home, who takes care of childhood. this gender division of work that is very useful to understand the scientific differences. But as I commented before, we have social practice that um, I think that he's more brilliant in terms of the female perspective, but she's finishing the degree. It's very important this because the social practice, we find that in some years ago, women are studying in the university more than men, but at the same time, socially, we think in the dark mind, in the adulthood, that men are more brilliant than women. And why it happens? This gender bias assumption in scientific careers. The impact of motherhood and fatherhood is basic, and also the attitude in the selection processes. For the subordinated and technical position, which attitude in terms of gender people, no, the hiring people observe, and for the top management position, because we think that beyond accreditation, there is a question of attitude to hire a person and how to identify, value, and remunerate soft skills, because we know that they are very important to these soft skills are very important to that is related with the quality of work. And it's important because as the last study identified in terms of European Union, that soft skills are basic to produce a inclusive science, no, and non-gender bias science, and not social bias science. And I think it's interesting to think about the different the soft skills and the ethics of care related, no, the people directly relate with women, and women often offer this kind of soft skills of teamwork, empathy, conflict resolution, adaptability. It's not that all the women do that, but people expect that women resolve the conflicts, that women do a step behind, women facilitate the teamwork. And how to measure, and I think it is also related to how to measure good sciences. Now we are open the criteria to the quality of knowledge, not only the quantity of knowledge, the quantity of publication, of citation, but it's related with the open science and the social impact of, for example, in the DORA criteria. And I think it's related with this other way to do science, and it is related to, for in a gender perspective of doing science. In comparison of the other one, the quantitative criteria that only focus in the impact factors, only focus on number of citation and rankings, and we know that sometimes this science produce bad science too in terms of quality of knowledge. And how it is reproduced, and I want to ask you the attention of this. You know, for example, when we read a development of a classic author, the citation for the unknown scholar, or the citation is for the big fish. And I think it's important in terms of the ranking and how many famous big fish you know in your field. And here, related to the ethics and the quality of science, just a reminder of this now an evidence of the main gender bias evidence of, for example, the heart disease in women. Now we know that we have doing a gender bias science, and it was very prejudiced for the women health and lives. But now we have to include this gender perspective. And only the last one, why it happens. I think the life of women as the same worthy of men's lives, no, and the trans women, the black, and it's related to the issue of the life of women is the same in terms of the value of the men, and also the assurance of human rights of women, no? For example, in the political level, no, as women have the same human rights than men in terms of the efforts to stop gender violence, for example. And it's also related with this gender bias assumption that is related with the lack of social science competencies and gender competencies. Okay, here I stop and then we can talk about these issues.
Okay, thank you very much, Lidia. Let me switch on. Thank you. I think that there were lots of very interesting ideas that came out of this talk that we can discuss. Let me start with some questions that are here in the chat. So someone asked about in which country was the study done that showed that at 6 years old children already think that boys are more brilliant than girls. Do you know where this
I think this study is international. They evaluate different countries. I remember, but I had to check. But I know that it's an Occidental study. No, it is made on Occidental countries. Because if we look for this issue in other countries, no, and I think you mentioned the age of scholarity. No, I think it's a key issue. Because now the educational system is key to reproduce or transform these gender stereotypes. Families, for sure, but also the educational system.
Mm-hmm. And also there's another question regarding the choice of partners, like how the way we choose partners may affect this bias in careers. So they say, for example, that in heterosexual relationships, women tend to choose older men or men that are more successful than them, while the men choose correspondingly. So they choose women that are less successful than them. And this results in women staying home more often. And what do you think we can do to change that? Or do you agree with that?
Of course, it depends of the negotiation inside families, that at the end the results of the data is what the data and the reality we find in the society. And I think there were exceptions, but in general, at the end, the negotiation between male and female in heterosexual partners in all ages, with age difference and without age difference, with a different level of studies, even with the male partners with less studies and less earning than women, at the end, women choose to take care of their child. And I think it is a transversal issue in terms of the gender norms. How it's more important to be a good mother than a good professional or scientific in general. We can find exceptions.
So this is very deep, it has deep roots, let's say. So someone is asking, going back to the stereotypes of children when they were very young, what can we do to minimize this internalization of these stereotypes?
I think we have to act in several dimensions. One, the educational system. I think here, at least in Catalonia, we are living an historical moment, because for the first time, the schools are introducing the gender perspective in the curriculum, in terms of they have to do a training for not be gender biased, and I think it's very important. And also with for example, the advertisement, that we identify this advertisement even in Abacus, that is a progressist cooperative here in Catalonia. Then we have to be active in saying them it's not possible now that you have reproducing this, and also in our individual behavior. For this reason, I think to be aware of your or unconscious gender bias, it's important to not reproduce these things. When we see a little girl with a princess dress, the comment that, oh, you are very beautiful, no? Or how, and these comments and the intensity of the gender pressure to be in this way and not in another way reproduce this. And I think it's very dangerous, the heteronormative way, not in heterosexual, but the identity, the personal identity configured with the other views, not with own views.
Yeah, so it's like very subtle things sometimes, no? Very subtle comments or things that can make a difference. So someone regarding in the science, particularly in the science career, someone asked in YouTube, they say that most people that I know, including myself, don't really like the position of science PI. And why are we then assuming that more women, or the women should be more represented in that position? What if the choice that women are taking of not becoming a PI is the correct choice, they're asking? And I think if I can add something to this, I also would like to, because you mentioned in your talk that there's this idea of finding new ways of being a woman, no? Like women, in order to get there, to be successful, maybe you have to be more ambitious, or have stronger character or something like that. But there's not that much talk about a change of another way of being men, no? And is that might be related to the question of this person, no? It's like the way of how we see success and what characteristics you need for leadership. It's very, very kind of men associated skills, and perhaps this is something that we need to change.
Yeah, I think in the selection process, this issue affects a lot, no, and this unconscious gender bias. And for example, when women access to top management position in science, we expect that they have another leadership, and sometimes they are selected in not top level, but in the medium level position to, for example, to work in soft skills, to work in team cohesion, to work in the conflict resolution. And for example, when we identify a team, a top-level management team, women usually resolve the social interaction conflicts, and men are occupied of making the great decisions in terms of the economics and the future of the university. And I think these soft skills are evaluated in the selection process. And I think it's important to notice that also men have the capacity to develop empathy skills, and I know that a lot of them have these empathy skills, teamwork, the adaptability also. And then we have to visualize and evaluate these men, and on the other hand, to recognize that not all women have the capacity, these soft skills, and it's important even to promote them, even if they don't have these soft skills. It's important. Another thing is the importance of the gender dimension in the research content. And I think if the women don't appear, the gender dimension don't appear too. And I think it's important in terms of which kind of science are we doing, an androcentric and gender biased, or an inclusive in terms of gender. And I think both of them, women and men, can do a non-androcentric science, but it's important to take the experience and also this knowledge, not only the sensibilization in terms of gender, the knowledge, the gender competencies, to introduce the gender dimension in research content.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think also related to technology, and like artificial intelligence and all these like new technologies, we really need to have the perspective of both women and men. And not only that, but also you mentioned intersectionality. And I wanted to ask you also about that. Like today, obviously, we're focused on gender unconscious bias, but we know that there's lots of other biases for race, sexual orientation, etc. Should we fight all of these fights at the same time, or how can we deal with intersectionality?
I think we must to incorporate all the intersectional inequalities when we are introducing the gender perspective. I am sure that it's important to work in the gender with an intersectional approach, in terms of not only intersectional approach without gender perspective, because it's also important, because sometimes this intersectional fight in terms of which axis of inequality is more important, gender or LGTBI or race, and it's important not to have to prioritize one of them, but the gender perspective has a transversal one, and then not only thinking in women, but also thinking in the other axis of inequalities. And it's another thing that it's important also is how to the binarism is related with gender stereotypes. This conceptualization of women and men, it's also that is very heteronormative and also very binarist in terms of there are only two gender and two sexes, reproduce also the gender stereotypes. And I think the other axes of inequalities are allies, and I think the science should to be inclusive in all terms, not only in gender.
Thank you very much. I don't think I'm missing any question in the chat. I don't know if anyone wants to ask something else, so you can write it there or raise your hand. I have one more question I wanted to ask in the meantime, and it's about what to do about it. So is this unconscious bias something that we can train and so that we can avoid it, or it's really difficult to avoid, and therefore we need to put in place protocols or processes or something that ensures that at least we can avoid the effects of the bias if we can't avoid the bias?
I think both. I think it's important to work in both lines. I consider that institutional actions to prevent this gender bias in terms of the gender distribution of labor, the labor opportunities is basic. Without this, we don't. If we only do courses and sensibilization processes, is not enough, of course, because and also the consequences of the gender bias. When the consequences of being gender bias have cost in terms of scientific, then sorry, but this is not science, this is not knowledge, this is a gender bias knowledge, then all the people have the capacity to put the dark side of unconscious gender bias in a conscious way. And it's important, these structural actions. And also the part of the knowledge on gender, it's also very important. Not only the sensibilization course, that it is necessary also to introduce the topic, but also the knowledge in terms of when we are thinking in gender bias in knowledge, we have to have a strong knowledge and in social science, in gender perspective, because if not, we segregate the data by sex and we think that it is all gender, non-gender biased data. But it's important. For this reason, I say that it's very important for me, these spaces to dialogue between social science, medical science, engineering, because I think this is the future of science, this interdisciplinarity.
Thank you very much, Lidia. We have another question coming from YouTube. It asks, do we have any data about the percentage of women that apply to a specific position and the percentage of women percent of women that are selected, and how that has evolved over the years? It doesn't specify in which field, but I'm going to assume it's in science because it's the same person that asked about the PIs.
it's very interesting, this data. We don't have this data in terms of a national measurement or an official data about this. I think that it was very important. I know that some institutions, and I think even in biomedical part, there are some institutions that they started to implement new data, and they were very innovative in this sense to identify this issue. And I think if we had this data, it is another gender bias knowledge, in terms of data, the official data we find in terms of the availability of knowledge. And we don't have the data. And if we had the data, the efforts to avoid this exclusion of women were higher, because we will have this evidence to check it's not a question of motivation of women, it's a question of discrimination.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think having the data is like a very, very first super important step. And I think I don't know if there's no more, they say we don't have the data. No, we don't. And I think because I think what you Lidia mentioned before, that not including a gender perspective is seen as the neutral way, while including a gender perspective is like, something you do if there's a problem or I don't know. But it's true that not including a gender perspective is already androcentric, no? So it's and I think this is a problem. Not having this data is also not including this gender perspective. It's like, we don't even look at this because we don't we don't think that is a potential problem. So I think if there's one clear lesson is that we need that data, and we need to look at the separated data for men and even non-binary data, no? So not only men and women, but the more data we have, the more we can work on it. There's one more question, sorry. We keep finding male-only panels in conferences. What's most critical? Men-only or men-dominated consortiums for grant applications, despite EU gender aspect advocacy. Sorry. We keep finding male-only panels in conferences and also male-only or male-dominated consortiums for grant applications, despite the EU gender aspect advocacy, despite the fact that the EU, asks for that. Is there going to be a solution?
Well, I think the European Union have a strong policy conviction not to introduce gender equality. For example, now this new requirement of having a gender equality plan in terms for submitting a proposal, and I think they are doing an important steps. But at the same time, we notice these things. And for example, this issue, for example, in terms of advocacy, I think the social networks are very important tools in terms of to raise attention of the European Union. Hey, you are very gender inclusive, but this panel it's not possible. And then I think this public issue, the panels, the all-male panels in terms of institutions are less common now for this reason, not for other one. But the grant application is the issue, because here there are money, and then the consortiums are not that visible like a panel in terms of, for example, the social networks, digital social networks advocacy. But they also measure these things. The European Union in their reports, they measure that the grants and the sex of grant holders, and they notice that they are a sex and a gender gap here. And then I hope in the next years they develop also measures in this sense. But I think it's a question of policy intention and also advocacy. As you say, it's important to keep the advocacy, gender, the feminist advocacy, to say, hey, here you are reproducing the things that you are saying that wants to overcome.
So speak up, speak up and advocate for whenever we see these things happening, and that's, it's a slow work, because I think, there's this the legal or administrative level, things are changing and is improving, but we know that this is a very long very long fight, and the fight for equality, for gender equality, or for equality of women and men, is a very, very long one historically, and same thing for race equality, etc. And there's still a lot to be done, but hopefully things like this talk, to become a bit more aware of our own unconscious biases, and of the things that we can do individually and all together, putting some pressure. I think it's important. So thank you very much, Lidia, for this talk.
Thank you to you, Marusha.
And thank you very much also to all the participants, and for the people who have followed us in YouTube. So as I said, the video will be posted in YouTube, so you can watch it there, and you can subscribe to the channel to be informed of any other talks that we organize. You can also subscribe to Ellipse, which is the PRBB news website, so you can find information about all the activities that the PRBB organizes. And yeah, thank you very much for your participation. Thanks.
Thank you. See you.